The event involving these two buildings has an amazingly accurate as above, so below correlation, namely the opposition between Saturn and Pluto. I'm not going to talk about that today. I want to talk about these buildings. It has been said about these two buildings that they can be symbolically represented as the pillars of Boaz and Jachin. You can find these pillars on all kinds of Freemasonic art. They are the biblical pillars which flank the entrance of Solomon's temple, and the temple was named after King Solomon, the biblical sorcerer. It's been said of these pillars that in the Kabbalah, these pillars explained all the mysteries of antagonism. In the Kabbalah, these two pillars are represented by the pillar of severity and the pillar of mercy. It's also been said that these two pillars of Jachin and Boaz can be seen to represent various polarities, for example, north and south, and we get a direct correlation there with the towers being named the North and the South Tower. In Boaz and Jachin, we also get the polarity of light and dark. One has the terrestrial sphere on it, the globe with sunlight on it, and the other one has the stars and the signs of the zodiac. It's the celestial pillar and the terrestrial pillar. You could say that we have another polarity of earth and heaven. We can also find the polarity of as above and so below. It's also been said of these pillars that although there are many opinions as to what the pillars standing outside of King Solomon's temple represented, there is broad agreement that the two pillars reflected some type of duality or even the concept of dualism and division itself. You can see them on the tarot card, the High Priestess, one black, one white, division, duality, the middle pillar being represented by the High Priestess herself. You can also find them at the entrances or even inside sometimes Freemasonic halls. So I wanted to take a look at this correlation between Boaz and Jachin, see if we can find anything more out about that correlation. So I had a look at the quote from Albert Pike in his book Morals and Dogma, and in this book 33 Degreer, Albert Pike, he says this: the solstices, Cancer and Capricorn, the two gates of heaven, are the two pillars of Hercules, beyond which he, the sun, never journeyed, and they still appear in our lodges as the two great columns, Jachin and Boaz. So according to Pike, the solstices are the pillars are the solstices. What does he mean? What are we meant to make of this comment? Well, you could argue that in the sense of polarities of these pillars, it's light and dark. There's another polarity here. The summer solstice is the longest day, the winter solstice is the shortest day. So this idea of splitting days into the polarities of the longest and the shortest days of the year. So I kind of wondered what all this meant, and I kept going. And it reminded me of this, the prime meridian. The prime meridian is an arbitrary line running from north to south through the poles, splitting the world effectively into two halves. There it is on the world map. Gives us the idea of east and west, east of this line and west of this line, or in this case, as we look at it, west and east. Now this line runs through London in the UK. That's where it is based, at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. You can even go there and you can find this line on the ground, and you can stand either side of this line, making yourself effectively a dualism, a division, with one half of you figuratively standing in the west and the other half of you standing in the east. This line began to become a thing, really, with this Act of Congress passed on the 3rd of August 1882, when President Chester Arthur called an international conference to fix on a common prime meridian. And eventually these guys, these fine upstanding gents, all convened in Washington and decided that yes, this line, the prime meridian, should run through London, giving us another duality of west and east, fixing the problem with things like train timetables and the localization of time. This would lead effectively to the idea of time zones, and you could argue that it's the first step towards globalization. And this line made me think it was kind of key in some way to try and figure out what Pike is really getting at when he says that the two pillars of Boaz and Jachin are the solstices. So I tried to run with this idea and go a little bit further down the rabbit hole. So I fixed my attention on London, where this line, this meridian, runs through, and I began to look first of all at the 2 dates of the solstices using a website called Time and Date, which you can use to find out the times of the sunrise and sunsets on any given day and the length of daylight effectively on any given day as well. And I kept in mind Pike's quote about Boaz and Jachin being the solstices, and I decided to run with this idea to see where it would lead me. So I looked at the idea that these two pillars are the summer solstice and the winter solstice. First of all, I looked at the summer solstice using the Time and Date website to find out exactly how much daylight we have on that day in the UK running through London, the prime meridian. And the summer solstice between the 20th and the 22nd of June on an arbitrary year, just chosen at random, the year 2000, the sunrise and sunset times there give us a daylight length of 16 hours, 38 minutes, with some fluctuating seconds. So I chose another year at random. This time I chose 2002, and again we see same kind of thing, 16 hours, 38 minutes with some fluctuating seconds. And I also chose another random year, 2020 this time, 16 hours, 38 minutes, some fluctuating seconds. That's also kind of rounded down. It tends to get rounded down, this time length. If you were to do a Google, how long is the longest day? It is generally rounded down to 16 hours and 38 minutes because the seconds kind of fluctuate over these 3 days. And that is also reflected in this article from Wikipedia, the summer solstice, which gives us a table of all the cities in the world. And I've just highlighted the European ones here. London, the daylight length from sunrise to sunset is 16 hours, 38 minutes. And that's from the Finnish Meteorological Institute. So I went with this idea of the rounded down time frame for daylight between sunrise and sunset. On the summer solstice, 16 hours, 38 minutes. So then I brought in the winter solstice, and I did the same thing. Chose a random year, this time 2018, and that's 7 hours, 49 minutes with some fluctuating seconds. Another random year, 2001, 7 hours, 49 minutes with some fluctuating seconds. And the same with 2021, 7 hours, 49 minutes, fluctuating seconds. Backed up again by this Finnish Meteorological Institute table, rounded down to 7 hours, 49 minutes. So I went with the idea that the winter solstice is 7 hours, 49 minutes, the shortest day. So I looked at these 2 day lengths from sunrise to sunset, the longest day and the shortest day, and I thought, well, what can I do next? So what I did was I rounded them down to minutes. So I found out the minute length, converted the hours and minutes into just minutes. So 16 hours times 60 gives us 960. 7 hours times 60 gives us 420. Add the extra minutes, and that gives us 998 minutes and 469 minutes. So that's the length of these 2 days. The longest day is 998 minutes. The shortest day, 469 minutes. So then I thought, well, what am I going to do with that? And then I thought, well, these two things are polarities. We have the longest day and the shortest day. And we remember the quote, the two pillars of Jachin and Boaz can be seen to represent various polarities. So I thought, well, let's try and find the remainder of these 2 days. So I subtracted 469 from 998, subtracted that, gave me this figure of 529. So then what I thought was, well, what do I do with that? I converted it back into hours, 8 hours and 49 minutes, and that is backed up by time and date. They do say that in terms of daylight, this day, the summer solstice, is 8 hours 49 minutes longer than the December solstice. And that's also backed up by the Royal Museums, Greenwich, home of the prime meridian. On their article, when is the winter solstice? And they back that up as being rounded down to 8 hours 49 minutes shorter than the summer solstice. But how does that lead us to this idea that these pillars can be symbolically represented in the towers? Well, I took that number and I thought about it as minutes, and then I thought, well, let's have a look at the days, minutes, and when it comes to minutes, a day has 1440 minutes. So then I decided to find out the remainder in each of the days. So I subtracted 998 minutes, the length of the longest day, from the length of a day in minutes. Same with the winter solstice, effectively giving us the length in minutes of the shortest night and the longest night. And that gave me these figures: 442 minutes for the shortest night, 971 minutes for the longest night. Did the maths on that, and that gives me the same number, 529. So this number, 529 in minutes, seems to me to be almost like it says in these quotes, that the two pillars, Boaz and Jachin, are polarities. This number, 529, seems to me to be the equilibrium, almost like the middle pillar. So what I did was I decided to subtract 529 from the number of minutes in a day. And when you do that, you get 9/11. Absolutely fascinating. So I think we can correlate the towers with these two pillars, Boaz and Jachin. Using Albert Pike's quote, we can find a direct correlation between these pillars and these towers, giving us the 9/11 that we always knew was there. The Roman numerals, the I in the Roman numerals being the pillars, and the X's. X is the 24th letter of the alphabet, 24 hours in a day. Very interesting. The sun and moon pillars, the longest day and the shortest day. And incidentally, if we go back to this idea of the meridian at the Royal Museums in Greenwich, this line was decided upon as being in London, the meridian being in London, back on August 3rd, 1882. And round about this time, we get a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Same two key astrological bodies that we see on, well, the day in question. And if we look at the time frame of this conference, which was begun with an act of Congress in 1882, 1882 until 2001 gives us another duality of forwards and backwards, 119 years and 911. Very, very intriguing. I'll see you in the next one.